Hello, YouTubers, and welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 8 articles in this episode for you. All the URLs are in the description of the video for your convenience. First one here is off of Western Journalism, and it says to sign G7 statement affirming Paris climate change agreement. United States refuses to sign on to a G7 statement reaffirming the United Nations Paris climate change agreement entered into by the former President Barack Obama. The G7, including Japan, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, France, and Canada, hope to issue a joint statement in support of the Paris Agreement's carbon emissions goals. Secretary of Energy Rick Perry informed the member nations the U.S. is currently reviewing the accord. Submitted the international agreement to the Senate for ratification, so it does not carry the force of the treaty law. The United States is committed to ensuring several access to affordable and reliable energy in order to promote economic growth and energy security, Perry said Monday in a statement. I discussed with my fellow that the Trump administration believes that economic growth can successfully go hand in hand, he adds. The example of Texas, where he served as governor from 2000 to 2015, when the Lone Star State added 4 million new residents while reducing emissions and improving the environment. He explained that low-emission natural gas can be part of a highly efficient mix of energy sources. In the presidential campaign, Trump pledged to remove the United States from the Paris Agreement and reaffirmed those plans shortly after taking office in January. The Paris Agreement requires the United States to reduce greenhouse emissions by more than 25% by 2025. His administration issued an executive order taking steps to rescind Obama's Clean Power Plan, which was the mechanism to address the Paris Agreement emissions. The New York Times criticized Trump for his executive order. It's clear that the United States has no intention of meeting the commitments that his predecessor had made to curb planet warming carbon dioxide pollution. Denials of climate change into national policy, the Times added. He made clear that American leadership in the global campaign against climate change would take a back seat to his commitment to energy industry jobs. In Monday's statement, Perry addressed these types of accusations, saying the Trump administration is committed to developing, deploying, and commercializing breakthrough technologies and developing the developing the necessary policies that will help renewables become competitive with traditional sources of energy. The article I have is off of Conservative Tribune. It says Obama meeting with leaders ahead of another global citizen speech. When past presidents, they shifted into a lower profile mode, letting their successor build their own legacies. Former President Barack Obama, however, seems doggedly determined to follow that path. That yet again, when it was announced he would be appearing in a panel discussion with the German Chancellor Angela Merkel in Germany in May to discuss global democratic responsibility. Side of the German Protestant Kirchentag, a conference held by the Evangelical Church in Germany, the former president will be appearing May the 25th later in a conversation called Being Involved in Democracy, Taking on Responsibility Locally and Globally. President Barack Obama, hold still here. President Barack Obama attending the Kirchentag in Berlin, which will ring in the Reformation summer, the international character of our anniversary celebrations. Bishop Heinrich Bedford Strom of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Bavaria, said in the article. Says German monk Martin Luther launched the Protestant Reformation in 1517. Form a global civil society network of over 2 billion Christians, together as people of faith, the firm hope for a better world, he added. Anyone who is pious also has to be politically minded. I'm looking forward to enthusiastic debates during the Reformation summer, he says. It sounds harmless enough until you consider the factious relationship between Merkel and as well as the general turn away from globalism espoused by Obama, the United States and abroad. Presidents, come on, have made public appearances after their presidency. Few have couched them so nakedly in the rubric of a campaign. Is a man who comes across as wanting to extend his legacy by meddling in the affairs of the executive office long after he's left. It's no coincidence that Kirchentag takes place at the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin, the same place Obama gave his first major foreign speech as a candidate back in 2008. And as so many of my countrymen have come before, tonight I speak to you not as a candidate for president, but as a citizen, a proud citizen of the United States, a fellow citizen of the world, Obama said in a speech, according to CNN. Years later, he returns, perhaps as a proud citizen of the United States and a fellow citizen of the world, but almost certainly as a man proud of disintegrating legacy and willing to defend it at all costs. Is off of Rick Wells. It says, computer glitch threatens to steal French election from Le Pen. The election could be stolen right out from under French populist Marine Le Pen by, of all things, a computer glitch. Unlike the Democrat globalist fabrication of the Russians hacking everything that didn't have a pulse, this one appears to be a legitimate factor potential of changing. The official story is that a computer bug electoral rolls has resulted in 2 ballots being issued to each of voters residing outside of France. They're largely pro-EU by virtue of their locations, if nothing else, and therefore opposed to Ms. Le Pen. Or had it been intentional, and who's naive enough to rule out foul play, it would have been an ingenious method for Le Pen opponents to get the ballots into the hands of people holding the most potential for being a majority opposed to her. The ballot cards are typically mailed out, as is the case this year, with some 500,000 having gotten twice their normal one person, one vote allotment. The first of 2 rounds of voting a week away on April the 23rd. While voting twice is illegal, the tight nature of the contest this year could entice some, perhaps many, into taking a chance anyway. FR reported during the primary elections for the left and the right candidates, numerous voters and journalists reported that they have been able to vote twice on stations. Further mucking up the situation, ballots have also been sent to foreigners who will be able to vote as well, legally. That's not unlike the 3 million Mexican illegals in California that the Democrats ushered to the polls, although it was fruits of a long-term effort to corrupt the system rather than a possible computer error. Number of duplicate ballots now in the possession of French voters, the Ministry of the Interior states no concern that the result of the election could be invalid, confident that the penalties for duplicate voting of 6 months in prison and a fine of over $15,000 will be enough. They made no statement as to the probability The investigations into potential abuse will be conducted outside of France in the foreign cities and nations perpetrators actually live, but it doesn't seem very likely. As if to guarantee that the double voting takes place and Le Pen is defeated, French authorities confirmed to the Express UK that they would not be investigating the potential electoral fraud until after the election, when the retrospective prosecution may take place, they noted. This could crush of surging to power, as the most French nationals living outside of their country are not, demonstrated by the fact that many feel they depend on European Union to guarantee their stay in foreign countries. First order of business, the post office is off of Liberty Headlines. It says Trump lets states block some Planned Parenthood funds. Trump signed HJ Resolution 43 into law Thursday, granting states the right to deny federal funds to Planned Parenthood and other women's providers. The legislation officially erases the Title X family planning program, which provides family planning and other health services to low-income families and uninsured individuals, including those who are not eligible for Medicaid. Was enacted in 1970 by former President Richard Nixon last year. Former President Barack Obama passed a related rule forbidding states from withholding funding for Planned Parenthood and other similar organizations. Obama's rule was finalized in December and went into effect in January. However, it was overturned in the Senate by a razor-thin margin on March the 30th. The adoption of HJ Resolution 43 could be chalked up as a victory for the Trump administration, though the president and fellow Republicans were unable to overturn the Affordable Care Act after a contentious battle in the House last month. With HJ Resolution 43 now law, they've achieved at least some of the goals they hoped to attain through the stymied Obamacare repeal. Part of the ACA repeal would have blocked federal funding for Planned Parenthood for a year. Schneidler, executive director for the nonprofit Pro-Life Action League, applauded the signing of HJ Resolution 43 into law, saying that the measure bodes well for taxpayers and reinforces the notion of democracy. It's a pro-life measure because it allows people's desire not to see abortion providers given taxpayer funding through policy. And after all, we cherish our democracy, and the taxpayers ought to have a say in where their money goes. Thursday. That for you is off of Liberty Headlines, and it says government employee Trump plan to cut bureaucracy is dangerous. In 6 months, the Trump administration plans to produce a plan to shrink the size of government, eliminate programs, and reduce the federal workforce, and is seeking public input on how to proceed. The Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney directs federal agencies. As part of their planning efforts, agencies should focus on fundamental scoping questions, such as analyzing whether activities should or should not be performed by the agency, and on improvements to existing business process. Requiring agencies to justify their functions is long overdue, said Chris Edwards, director of tax at the Libertarian Cato Institute. He said the scoping should include determining if activities non-essential, whether they violate federalism, and whether they would flunk a cost-benefit test. Still, he said the success of the plan could depend on the will of both Congress and political appointees implementing the reforms. This could be the best shot we have of eliminating agencies, Edwards told the Daily Signal. A lot will depend on the quality of political appointees and to small government. During the George W. Bush administration, a lot of the political appointees were just corporate climbers. Also, will members of Congress be supportive? After President Donald Trump's skinny budget We saw a lot of Republicans in Congress, unfortunately, defend programs in their region, Edwards added. Trump has moved at a very deliberative pace, process or filing political positions thus far, noted Robert Rector, a senior research fellow with the Heritage Foundation, who is skeptical of the plan. Policy changes can't come from the bureaucracies themselves, Rector told the Daily Signal. Policy changes need to come through Congress and comes when you bring outsiders in to impose reforms. It's off the Conservative Tribune, and it says facts point to Obama as the real Russian puppet. In an op-ed for the New York Post, Review's Rich Lowry declared that there really was a Russian puppet in the White House, and his name was Barack Obama. Monday piece, Lowry wrote that circumstantial evidence is mounting that the Kremlin succeeded in infiltrating the U.S. government at highest level, but that it was done during the Obama administration. He reset with Russia shortly after its clash with Georgia in 2008, Lowry wrote. He concluded that the New START agreement with Moscow that reduced our nuclear forces but not theirs. Mitt Romney warned about Russia in 2012 campaign. Obama rejected him as Cold War relic. This president then went on to forge an agreement with Russia's ally Iran to allow it to preserve its nuclear program. During the Red Line fiasco, he eagerly grasped a lifeline from Russia at the price of accepting its intervention in Syria. He never budged on giving Ukraine lethal weapons to defend itself from Russian attack. Finally, Obama cut U.S. defense spending and cracked down on fossil fuels, a policy that Russia welcomes since its economy is dependent on high oil prices. And the chickens have now come home to roost, Lowry argued. The cost of Obama's orientation toward Russia became clearer over the last 2 weeks when he pulled up short from enforcing his red line, an agreement with the Russians to remove Bashar al-Assad weapons became the cover his retreat, Lowry said. Even if Obama eventually got tougher on Russia, imposing sanctions after the Ukraine invasion and sending contingents of U.S. troops to countries near Russia, he never entirely shed his reflex toward accommodation. Lowry is 100% right. The Democrats' neo-John Birch hysteria over Russia may have reached a fever pitch now, but that's mostly because it's convenient excuse as to why they lost the presidential election. For the Democrat talk about President Donald Trump being Kremlin puppet, it's worth pointing out that the president did something Obama never would: strike back at Russia's client state, Syria, after Assad used chemical weapons. And what necessitated that? Barack Obama's policy of accommodation, bordering on appeasement to Russia and its allies. There was a Kremlin puppet in the White House. Thankfully, term limits forced him to leave. The next article I have is off of BizPac Review. This says, Chelsea calls Trump appalling over 13-year-old cheap shot, promptly pummeled with ugly family history. You're really bad at Twitter. Chelsea Clinton took another leap off the social media cliff by chiming in on an attempt to smear President Trump for something he said over a decade ago. A story published by Hollywood Reporter on Wednesday revealed the not-so-breaking news of Trump repeating an offensive word at a 2004 Friars Club annual roast where he was the guest of honor. It didn't take long for Trump critics to cherry-pick the piece and pull out some dated cheap shots. Seth Abramovich puts out a tweet here. It says 7 years before Comedy Central and WHCD, real Donald Trump was roasted at the Friars where he said the C word. Clinton saw an opportunity to throw some stones and added her 2 cents on Twitter. She put out the tweet saying appalling, just because something isn't surprising or even is expected at this point doesn't make it less appalling. She apparently forgot the adage about those who live in glass houses. because people started jumping on her left, right, and sideways. There's tweets here. Chelsea Clinton, ask your father, what is the most appalling way to enjoy a cigar? Then delete your account. You're really bad at Twitter. Another one says, so rich when anyone named Clinton labels someone appalling. Another one says, oh, geez, this kind of whining gets us Democrats into trouble. Doesn't win us votes. Chill, Chelsea. Twitter uses shredded Clinton, creating new thesaurus listing for the word appalling on the way. One says, you've got to be kidding. I can't think of two people who have accumulated more appalling behavior in my lifetime than your parents. Another one says, what your father did in the White House while married is not appalling, shaking my head. Another one says, Trump said a bad word. Your mom considered Al-Qaeda an ally. Not surprising, though. Skip the sanctimony. Another one says, it's appalling that your father won't talk to his black son. Another one says, we have all said things that are appalling to someone, including your mom evading sniper fire or your dad not having sexual relations. Well, I'm not going to read them all. I mean, the list just goes on and on. They just roast her. And hey, she's the one that jumped into that frying pan, ain't she? And the final one for today is off of Conservative Tribune. It says, Hillary is now a model for ugly high heels. As the Rolling Stones taught us, you can't always get what you want. However, and you try sometimes, you might just end up modeling shoes for Katy Perry. That's the consolation prize that Democrat nominee has landed instead of presidency, according to People magazine. Perry was major celebrity supporter of Clinton during the 2016 election. A good enough reason not to vote for her if you ever needed one. The Roar singer has a line of shoes, which seems absurd for a musician until you realize she any more irritating in patent leather than she is in an MP3 format. So Perry named a pair of shoes after former First Lady, Secretary of State, and homebrew server aficionado. Not only that, she actually convinced Hillary to model them on Instagram. And there is a picture of Hillary in her Katy Perry called Power Pumps. Lord have mercy. Power Pump your way over to katyperrycollections.com for the last few hours of the spring 25% sale. Hillary Clinton is wearing the Hillary. And I'm reading this, okay? This ain't me talking. It's just, I'm reading this. Oh my God, I love her so much. The emoji adorned post reads. Oh my God. Also, get an entire box of Hillary Kane 2016 shirts absolutely free with a purchase or no purchase. Of course, shilling is a proud tradition for losing candidates. One vividly remembers Walter Mondale appearing alongside the Where's the Beef lady in those Wendy's commercials. Block ads where Ross Perot went through an entire pile of incomprehensible graphs about tax preparation in just 30 seconds. Or where Al Gore made a silly documentary about global warming that inexplicably met with commercial success. Oh, wait, that last one actually happened. Never mind. One question, the wisdom of dedicating a shoe to someone whose campaign was such a disaster that it made Titanic feel better about itself. However, at this point, Perry deserves whatever happens to her, so why not? I have some other themed shoe suggestions for the Maxine Waters, the Planned Parenthood Abortive Fashion Special, and celebrating 30 years of Ishtar. As for Hillary, we have only one request. Could someone in her entourage please buy her a copy of What Color Is Your Parachute? And that's all I have for you this morning. Here, give it a thumbs up. Share it on your social media so everybody can be entertained. And don't forget to subscribe. That way you'll stay informed. Have a great day.